Okay, friends, welcome to Chapter 1 presentation for Advanced Systems Planning course. Chapter 1 presentation is titled Managing IT in a Digital World. In essence, this presentation is meant to give you a background on what it is like to manage organizations in an increasingly digitalized business and social environment. Before we go into details, let's talk a little bit about some fundamental definitions, the definitions that are central to this course. Now, as you know by now, this course is largely about managing information technology. Now, both practitioners and researchers, they usually understand information technology in terms of two main components. Computer technology, meaning hardware and software components of an information system, and those components are used for processing and storing data or information. And number two, various communication technologies, for example, voice and data networks for transmitting information. So those two components, computer technology and communications technology, they comprise what is typically understood as IT. Now, to jump a little bit forward, One thing that you need to know is that sometimes another term for information technology or IT is ICT. ICT stands for Information and Communication Technology. So this term seems to combine like all three components: hardware, software, and networking equipment. Now, a much broader term, and you see this term in the title of our course, is information systems. Now, information systems are typically this concept is typically understood as a combination of IT, information technology, but also people and organizations. So it's information systems is a much broader organizational concept, and we're going to talk more about this idea later on as we progress through the course. Now, this course, as you can tell from the syllabus, has four main parts. In the first part, we will talk about technologies available today, and also some emerging trends with respect to technology, more specifically for hardware, software, networks, and data. So basically, this is an overview of various hardware, software, and networking technologies that exist today, and also an overview of some future trends, where those technologies are going. Part 2 is devoted largely to software applications for supporting business operations and business intelligence. So basically, this is an overview of different types of software applications or information systems, such as internet-based information systems, enterprise-wide information systems, and so forth. So this is largely about enterprise software. In Part 3, we will talk about best practices for acquiring and implementing new systems. So basically, if you as an organization decide to introduce an information system to address a particular organizational problem, how do you go about developing it yourself or acquiring it from an external vendor? And also this part at the end will touch on IT project management, because if you decide to develop an information system solution yourself, you'll have to manage that project. So we're going to touch on that briefly. Part 4 is basically a very high-level strategic perspective on the information system function. This is the kind of perspective that most senior managers typically have, including the CIO. So Part 4 is largely about planning and managing IS department resources, or information system department's resources. It will also touch on such important issues as managing security and also some social, ethical, and legal considerations in relation to information system department management. So this is like a very high-level overview of our course. So what is happening nowadays with respect to information technology that seems to have a profound impact on the way businesses, organizations, societies, and even countries operate? First of all, IT information technology has become more pervasive. It's not used only by back office workers nowadays, but by frontline workers, but pretty much everybody. So more and more employees are reliant upon information technology for accomplishing their work activities. I remember in the old days, some of my students, whenever I teach an MIS course, they would tell me something like this, look, I'm a marketing major, or I'm an accounting major. I don't have any interest or any skills in information technology, and I don't want to have those skills. So those students were kind of politely telling me that this course is something that is required, something that they need to do, but something that they're not interested in, right? I think over the last few years, this argument has become very weak because, as I tell to my students, nowadays there's no escape from information technology. It doesn't matter who you are, which kind of line of work you are at, what kind of degree you have, you will end up using information technology for your work. I mean, pick any kind of field, any kind of managerial position, let's say marketing, and you probably know that nowadays marketing is largely driven by data analytics, IT-based data analytics. It's also driven by social networks on the internet. So there's no escape from technology, even if you're a marketing manager or a marketing professional, right? Education, which is my field, is also heavily driven by information technology. We wouldn't be able to have this kind of online course if we didn't have Canvas, right? So nowadays it's almost a second literacy expectation for students and also for instructors to know how to use all those online platforms such as Canvas and Blackboard. So yeah, as I said, business managers, not just IT managers, not just programmers, are responsible for IT investment and effective system utilization and management. So basically, even if you don't see yourself in IT, let's say you're a marketing professional or an accounting professional, if you move to a managerial role, you'll end up managing IT resources. By the year 2000, the total annual cost of IT purchases was more than half of the annual capital expenditures of businesses in developed countries. So basically what this means is that IT expenditures are increasing in terms of their share of overall organizational expenses. So basically most organizations, especially service organizations, the kind of organizations that deal with intangible knowledge assets, they're increasingly spending on IT. Another interesting trend is that as IT becomes more pervasive and also cheaper, it seems to be kind of leveling the difference between the developed world and the developing world, right? In the old days, certain aspects of education, of economic activity were available exclusively to the so-called developed world. But nowadays, anybody with internet access living pretty much anywhere around the globe can get all those knowledge assets at his or her fingertips. Recently I watched a presentation by a gentleman, I always forget his last name, I think his last name is Hickman. He's one of the creators, he's one of the popularizers of the R programming language. And he's also the chief scientist for that company that produces R Studio, which is the development environment for the R programming language. And what he said in his presentation, he said, nowadays, if you want to learn something, you only need two things. Number one, you need to have motivation to learn something, okay? And number two, you need to have Google. That's all you need to learn something and to become proficient in a particular field. And once you do that, you can start competing at a global level. I'm talking about, let's say, some kind of freelance web development job or anything that is related to knowledge production. Now, one thing that is underlying the trend where IT seems to be very pervasive and seems to be erasing boundaries between the developing world and the developed world is that the hardware, the physical assets that comprise information technology, they're becoming increasingly powerful, increasingly easy to use, and increasingly cheap, right? So the era of computers becoming an integral part of human life started somewhere in 1970s. This is when microcomputers were born. Because before that, companies were operating huge mainframe computers, and one mainframe computer was just too big, too sophisticated, and too expensive for any individual to have at his or her home. So microcomputers, those personal computers were born in 1970s, and this is where all those guys such as, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, this is where they saw potential in personal computer industry, and that's when they started developing their own computers in the case of Apple, and also their own software applications in the case of Microsoft. So IBM is infamous for not predicting this kind of opportunity for microcomputers, for personal computers. But eventually they started realizing how important the personal computer industry will be for their own business, so they came up with their own personal computer. Somewhere in early 1990s, companies started producing PDAs, something that made computers more mobile, the so-called personal digital assistants more mobile, more convenient, cheaper in a way, and also available to a wider audience. Laptop computers became and laptop computers outsold desktops by 2005, meaning they became more pervasive, more common. And nowadays, the same thing is happening with smartphones, such as iPhones or iPads. Those kind of computers, they're outselling laptops and desktop computers, of course. And this again makes computing, cheaper and more accessible, not only in the developed world but also in developing countries. And the thing about those smartphones is that, if you take a typical, even inexpensive smartphone, you will see it has the kind of, it has a processing power, functionality, and quality much higher than those expensive microcomputers or even mainframes of the past. Now, I told you before that there are very famous, or should I say, infamous examples of companies sort of missing out on that trend. Missing out on the trend of personal computers becoming accessible to individuals across the globe and also becoming pervasive. I'll just mention one of them. There was a study commissioned by the Digital Equipment Corporation, and they asked a consulting company, and I think the rumors are that it was like one of the big management consulting companies. So they asked them to do a market study and predict how important personal computers will become to their business. And then based on that study, Ken Olsen, president and chairman of Digital Equipment Corporation, he said something like, "There's no reason anyone would want a computer in their home." Another famous prediction was by Bill Gates. I think there was some kind of limitation on their DOS or disk operating system. And that system could not manage more than 640 kilobytes of memory. So he's famous or infamous for saying that 640 kilobytes of memory is is the maximum size that anybody would ever need. Now, of course, this sounds funny because nowadays personal computers, even smartphones, sometimes they have storage capacity of close to terabyte, not just a few hundred kilobytes. So what is different about computer software nowadays? Well, first of all, it's integrated. Nowadays, there is a trend to have integrated software, not just like a collection of individual software applications kind of spread out across an organization. There's a trend to have like one big enterprise system that automates, that puts on the rails of technology all processes, all departments within an organization. Of course, this kind of integration creates a number of benefits. You have central data storage. You don't have any kind of duplication that leads to increased storage cost, and also leads to errors where, like when you store information in different parts of an organization, the information found in one part can contradict the information found in the other part, and so forth. Again, in the old days, it was common to have a combination of applications, and a lot of companies were struggling to integrate those applications together. So nowadays, that's not the case. There's one single enterprise system, and it automates everything. That reminds me of the first research project that I did when I was a doctoral student, and my research project was basically on PeopleSoft implementation at the University of Houston. I remember they started slow. They started by implementing only certain modules such as student financials, human resource management, and so forth. But eventually the entire university was automated with the help of PeopleSoft, which is that large ERP package. And at some point it became scary because everything was integrated. For example, when you check out books, you scan those books at the checkout in the library, immediately those books are added to your student account. If you fail to return those books, immediately this amount is charged to your financials, to your account. So everything was integrated and automated. Whatever you do in one part as a student, as an employee, as a contractor is visible in another part. So that was amazing. Now, the other thing that is happening with software is that it's downloadable. I mean, it's being distributed over the internet. And it's also increasingly social, right? It's no longer software companies have that vision where, A software application is a standalone tool. It's all integrated with other users so that people can collaborate. And this seems to be very much aligned with the way humans work, because we humans, we're social animals. We don't work alone. We like to work with others, and sometimes working with others is a necessity, because otherwise we won't be able to achieve synergies or economies of scale, while working alone. So software nowadays is increasingly social as well. Now, what about networks? The same trend that you saw for hardware is probably applicable to networks. Networks are becoming increasingly high bandwidth, meaning they have high throughput capacity. They're also increasingly wireless. Nowadays, it's almost an expectation that there is a Wi-Fi access, inside universities, inside businesses, inside restaurants. And networks, because they're so pervasive, so powerful and so cheap, they're also creating that cloud phenomena. Cloud phenomena means that network is becoming your operating system and your storage system. Everything that a lot of the applications, a lot of the data that people use nowadays on their smartphones, on their laptops and desktop computers, it's available from the cloud, right? And by cloud we mean the internet. So think about it. In the old days, you would have like a mainframe, like a big computer that would have its own operating system, and all the data will be stored centrally, within that system, within that mainframe, or as a part of that mainframe. Also, all the applications were installed on the mainframe. Nowadays, the architecture is on the other side of the axis, meaning everything that you need is stored on the internet, and all you have on your side as a user is some kind of simple terminal, some simple input and output device such as an iPad. Okay, so pervasiveness of networks and their increased bandwidth and accessibility created this trend of cloud, cloud computing or cloud architecture. Because of all those trends with computer hardware and software, companies increasingly view information technologies as a strategic weapon, meaning as something that can give them a competitive edge, something that will ensure their operational excellence, profitability, and long-term survival. So some companies are using information technology strategically, let's say, to reduce cost. Famous examples of reducing cost with information technology is Walmart. I mean, Walmart has been a pioneer in implementing information technology in retail, and the main purpose of that largely was cutting down costs through automating transactions. For example, they came up with this barcode system where you can automatically check out things at the cashiers, and also automatically reorder things, when your stock becomes low. So that's like shortening order cycles. And also providing information for decision making, because at Walmart, every manager can know in real time what kind of items are being popular, what kind of items are sold out, what needs to be replenished, and so forth. Also, information technology is used increasingly by companies to differentiate themselves, to offer something unique. An example that comes to my mind is a company that we're probably going to discuss, during this course. This company is called Land's End. There's a huge case written on Land's End by my advisor, actually. But to make the story short, what they did, this company was one of the pioneering company when it comes to using internet to allow customers to customize their clothing. So basically, the way it worked is that you could go online, and then you take measurements of your own body, and then based on those measurements, you can customize fabric, colors, and basically you can get like a pair of custom trousers or custom shirt. And it was amazingly popular among customers, especially customers who have the so-called non-standard body shapes, right? And my advisor is one of them. He's a very tall man. I think he's like above. I think he told me he's like 6'10" or something like that. So he's very tall, and he always told me that finding pants or finding shirts that fit seems to be a problem. So Land's End, it really offered them something different. And sometimes companies are doing both. They are lowering their costs, and they're also differentiating their products and services with the help of information technology. An example that comes to my mind is Dell. I mean, Dell was able to, as they say, disintermediate the personal computer industry by removing the retailers from their value chain. So if you go to Dell.com, you can buy a computer, and not only that, not only you can buy a computer from home without going to a retailer, you can also customize your computer. You can select pretty much any configuration that you want for your own desktop computer or for your own workstation. So you see, in the case of Dell.com, we see both. By cutting out retailers, they remove that margin, they remove that additional intermediary in the value chain, being able to offer lower prices to customers because they don't have to invest into physical retail locations. They don't have to pay a premium for the kind of service that is offered by retailers. So that's how costs are lowered. And then differentiation component is pretty clear because with Dell you can always get the exact computer, the exact configuration that you need. Now, advancements in hardware, software, and network is changing not only the way companies operate, it also changes the way people, individuals, live and work. For example, telecommuting is becoming increasingly popular. Telecommuting means individuals use mobile technology or desktop computers to access work remotely, let's say from their home. In fact, that's what you're doing nowadays. For those of you who take this course online, you're like telecommuters. You're accessing this course online and perhaps through a cell phone without actually physically coming here to campus. Now, the pros are very clear. It's flexible, meaning you can you don't have to commute. You can do things at your own time, at your own pace. It helps a lot of people to preserve their work-life balance, so they study whenever they have time. They don't waste time commuting, and they don't spend time in traffic jams. But of course there are cons. I mean, there is that feeling of being isolated. And by the way, I've done telecommuting work myself, and after a few months I felt like, well, I wish I could go to an office, simply just to say hello to people, drink some coffee, hang out, because sometimes it's difficult psychologically to be a telecommuter. And then there are also concerns about job promotional opportunities, because sometimes organizations, they view those telecommuters as like freelancers, like add-ons, something that can easily be replaced. Oftentimes they don't view those, unfortunately, they don't view those telecommuters as full-fledged members of their family, of their organization. Also, virtual teams are becoming pervasive, where people are dispersed geographically, and they use information technology. More specifically, they use internet to work together as one team, as if they were operating in the premises of just one physical location. So there are some pros. Workers can be located anywhere, as I said. And then teams can be comprised of members with specialized skills from different business units or companies. So, for example, if you cannot find somebody with specialized skills here, you can find somebody in Brazil. And I remember when I was a doctoral student, we had to develop a particular piece of software for one of our research projects. And I went to a freelance website where I described the project, and I was basically inviting bidders. And I remember the guy who won that bid, when he was actually bidding for my project, he didn't have a team. I mean, he didn't have people to work with on my project. But as soon as he won the team, I figured out he contracted certain people. And I remember one of those people was a lady who was a graphical designer from Brazil. So I found it amazing that within a few days he had a full-fledged team working together on my project. But of course, it sounds good on paper, it sounds good in theory, but coordination across team members becomes more difficult. By the way, I'm expecting that in this course you will do a group project online using some kind of virtual team. I'm talking about those students who take this course through the web. So hopefully it will all go smoothly. Hopefully we have a group of people who are committed 100%, meaning nothing stands in their way of participating in this class and in this group project. But sometimes you never know. And as you probably know from your own experience, it's kind of easy to kind of get lost, online. In other words, it's easy to kind of lose touch with your team members, with your project when you're doing this online, as opposed to doing it face to face when you come to class and you kind of physically see your team members. And if you don't do something, you feel guilty and you cannot hide because you're all sitting in a classroom. But it's easy to do those things. It's easy to get disconnected from your teamwork when you do a class online. And you probably know that. I think I touched on that topic already. Because IT is becoming so pervasive and so cheap, there are a lot of people who view themselves as free agents. They work at their own pace from anywhere, anytime. I think those people are called freelancers or downshifters sometimes, because nowadays there's not, if your job if your job involves information technology management or any kind of knowledge work, I mean, you could be sitting somewhere in Thailand under a palm tree enjoying the beach while at the same time developing code for an organization, let's say in Atlanta, Georgia, right? So there are some pros, there are some additional pros of that kind of free agent or freelance arrangement for people. First of all, you can kind of dictate your own terms. You work when you choose. You can also decide which projects you will work on, which projects seem to excite you. But there are cons. There is lack of benefits. Typically, those kind of freelancers, they don't have, health insurance. And also, it's sometimes unpredictable. I mean, sometimes those people who engage into freelance work, who become free agents, they think that life and work will become more predictable, but then they discover that it becomes more unpredictable because you don't have normal office hours. It's all kind of structured around projects. And I know from my own experience and by observing others that a lot of the time those freelancers, they just end up working 24/7 without regard to which time of the day it is it day or night, because sometimes they have clients on the opposite side of the world. And although it's night in their location, it's already morning in their client's location, so they have to stay up for a meeting or they have to finish something. So in reality, schedule sometimes becomes unpredictable if you're a free agent. Now, this class is largely about managing information systems department. Information system department, they're basically, I'm not sure how common this term nowadays, information system department. I think most people, they call them IT departments. And those IT departments, they vary in terms of their role that they play within an organization. So on the one hand, you have the so-called support role. Now, support role of an information system department is typically common for the so-called brick and mortar or the so-called, blue-collar or manufacturing organizations. Now, in their case, information technology is often not a strategic asset. So all they care about is that the network is available, it's up and running, internet connection is working, the minimum necessary applications are available to managers and employees. So it's like a support role. But in some organizations, and typically those are the organizations that are information intensive, such as banks, educational institutions, engineering companies, information technology is a strategic resource, and information system departments, they play a strategic role because a lot of the initiatives designed to improve operational excellence, to gain competitive edge, they are actually carried out by IS departments. So in those organizations, information systems departments, they play a strategic role and they require special attention and handling. I mean, imagine what will happen if a network of a bank or a stock trading company such as New York Stock Exchange goes offline for a few minutes. I mean, that could result in losses in the magnitude of billions of US dollars. Damage to the reputation, all kinds of social problems, economic problems for the specific company. So in that case, information system department has to be, plays a strategic role and has to be managed in a different way. Now, managing an information system department typically involves managing three types of resources. First of all, the technology infrastructure, computers, software, hardware, and networks. Then human resources, IT professionals, business analysts, system analysts, programmers, IT managers, and also business IT relationships. So I'm not sure whether this term is a good one because it seems to be kind of restrictive to relationships. It's basically like all those social assets that a chief technology manager has to deal with. For example, relationships with the CEO, chief executive officer, other business units, alignment between the information system department or IT function and the overall organization. So all those things that seem to be on that social organizational side, they fall into this category. Now, I think I already mentioned that all those assets are managed by somebody called the Chief Information Officer or CIO. So a CIO is a firm's high-level general IT manager with both technology and business leadership experience. I think it's became almost like an axiom, over the last 10 or 20 years that you cannot have a CIO, Chief Information Officer, who is just like a competent programmer or somebody who is just competent in the technology aspect. It needs to be a business person with leadership and managerial skills. So a CEO, together with the organization's executive management team, ensures that alignment of IT resources with business goals and plans for integration of IT for strategic advantage. Well, it's like a complicated sentence, but basically the key here is integration or alignment of whatever the IT department is doing with whatever strategies or goals that the organization has as a whole. And this course talks about a lot of things related to IT management, but largely the ultimate goal is this: to teach managers how to think, how to have this kind of dualistic reasoning, how to think in terms of the IT department and also the entire organization. And of course, CIO, although he's largely a business executive, a management professional, he's also responsible for computer and communication operations and also for software. But that's only the tip of the iceberg, because what's lying underneath is that issue of alignment, of supporting organizational strategies and goals. Now, CIOs typically they are treated as C-level executives. They're like they're at the vice president level. It's an interesting observation that in the old days, the position of a CIO was not very lucrative to business professionals, because they knew that most CEOs or presidents, they're promoted from such fields as marketing and finance. But again, things are changing nowadays. At least some organizations, some knowledge and information-intensive organizations, they are so much driven by data, by information technology, that CIOs are often next in line for the CEO post as well. So the kind of organizations I'm talking about here are .coms, for example, Google.com. I mean, whoever is in charge in Google probably has to have a good understanding of the hardware, software, and networking infrastructure of Google, because this seems to be central to their business. But the typical place for a CEO is like among the C-suites, among the vice presidents, and typically there will be like all those IT managers underneath him, responsible for various areas of the information system function. So this concludes our Chapter 1 presentation. Thank you very much for listening.